Okay, so I got a new tool. This is a MakerMade CNC machine. This will allow me to cut 4x8 sheet material on a wall-mounted or frame-mounted upright rig. It runs on chain drives with stepper motors. So it'll be a process to set this up. I have to build the frame, but this will be invaluable for bus work and other projects that I'm currently working on. So anyhow, I'm excited to put this thing together and see how it works. Alright, so I'm taking stuff out of the box. We got stepper motors. They've labeled them as the axis is X, Y, X, Y, and Z. Z gets mounted on, well, this is just a diagram. There's a sled in the bottom of the box out of, I think it's made of wood. That'll get the cutting head mounted to it. Power cord. USB cable, I believe. These would be the cables for the cutting head to travel, I think. And we've got miscellaneous hardware and Allen tools, some zip ties. They've labeled the bags nicely, so that's pretty sweet. Some mounting screws for the short frame, motor hardware. So, and then this one's labeled as longer frame mounting screws. So they even give the screws, so I don't have to go shopping for screws. Bearing cartridge. I'm not sure what that is. Oh yeah, I am. This is on the cutting head. This is what the chains roll across. It's for smooth operation. And then here are the chains. I may end up getting longer ones and build a bigger frame, but this is 11-foot chains. They've got a USB with some, I assume, useful information on it. Here's some stand-ups, the 3 stand-ups for the cutting head that mount the roller bearings, I believe. Some additional hardware, I think, for the cutting head. These are brackets to build the frame with. You got to get lumber and build your own frame. And these are the same type of thing. I believe these are the ones that the stepper motors mount to at the top. This is a spring that holds the chains under tension so that they don't skip on the sprockets. This is labeled brains. It's, I guess, their control unit. Take a look at that if I can open it one-handed. So it's in a nice 3D printed case. They've given some stickers and instructions. Power supply. What else is here? The Z-axis mount. This is bits, starter bits. So that's handy. This is part of the head that the bearings mount to. I assume this one's the rig for, probably the aluminum rig that does the plunge mechanism on the screw with the router. So this will be holding the router. And for a router, I actually picked up a refurbished Bosch Colt router. I forget the model number of it, but I found this on Amazon for like 80 bucks as a refurbished unit. It's got variable speed settings, which is important for working with different materials. So it goes from slow through to like 30,000 RPM. I don't know exactly what each setting is yet on the router. I'll have to figure out the RPMs, approximate RPMs per setting. Alright, so we'll take the Z-axis out. Take that apart later, but it's going to be the mechanism that pushes this motor in and out. Or, yeah, that motor pushes this in and out, that's what I'm trying to say. Then here's the sled. And this is what the Z-axis mounts to these aluminum slot tracks. And then the other stuff mounts on stand-ups that connect through with bolts, recessed bolts. So that's what's in the box. Alright, so the first step in the assembly process was the hardware kit, bag G. I'd kind of dumped the contents in this metal plate to keep from losing anything. And you're supposed to use 6 screws per L bracket. And this is the, forget what they call this, but this is where the pulleys will go, or the bearings will go. And I'm working on the last one. As you can see, they made tiny indentations. Really hard to see. Right here's one, here's one. Would have been nice if the indentations were a little easier to see, a little more divoted. But they made tiny indentations for where the screws go. So anyway, I'm working on this third L bracket now. So I also built a little printable template quickly in Visio and then printed it out. This is 3.5 inches diameter. I posted this to the MakerMade community page as a PDF file. But anyway, this is to align the router directly in the center of the hole. I just taped it to this dust collection cover to align, make sure that the sled here was aligned properly in this direction. So it's sort of like a target. Actually, when I put it on, put the router in and tightened it, my eyeballing from when I initially snugged this up, before I even realized I had to do this step, it was actually accurate. So I've got a good sense of space. If you look at, that's pretty close. So close enough for me. But if you get that wrong, the machine's going to cut in an errored way. It's not going to have the right tolerances. You know, if this is slid over this way or over that way, you know, it's going to mess up all your cuts. Alright, so what I'm doing right now in my disgustingly messy garage is setting up the frame for the MakerMade. I've modified their design a little bit. I'm going to use 15-degree angle corner bracing. I've laid out and chopped the bottom pieces, one of which is right there. Got a straight edge here, piece of aluminum. But I'm going to basically make it so that I can, my plan is to be able to adjust the skirt for different material thicknesses. So that's a modification on their design. So I'm using this sheet of MDF under here as my spoil board. Was going to use these and follow their plan, but I actually figured out that the Home Depot or Lowe's that cut them for me, actually I think it was Lowe's, that their saw wasn't even square, so these are not right. So it was a waste of money, but I'm going to use them to reinforce. Use this plywood, 3/4 ply, to reinforce the corners and make sure this is the right 15-degree angle. So anyway, I'm going to keep going. Alright, so I've got the two supports cut out so that they'll make a 15-degree angle, 75 degrees in this corner. And wood was a little short, so I had to do the math to figure out where to draw that line. But anyway, this will support the lean of the spoil board and make the whole thing accurate as far as the angle goes, which is critical for the tolerances on the CNC. You know, want the exact angle that they say it needs. So anyway, I'm going to keep going. Alright, so I'm laying out the uprights. I'm drilling a hole to pilot for the initial screw on these uprights to go to the base plates. And then these will follow the center line, and we'll screw them in before we get these attached to the base plates. So that way they help align everything. So anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and keep moving here. Okay, so I've got both of these, this one and this one. I've got both of these 15-degree plates attached to the uprights. And at this point I need to mark where the brackets go for the two top beams. I'm building the XL frame of my own riff on their design with a 12-foot cross beam so that I can get the 15-foot chains and you know, do larger work. So anyway, next step, like I said, is to put the marks here for those support brackets for those beams. Alright, so there's the first upright. I've got it nice and tight in a 90 here, so I can double check that with my T-square and make sure that, you know, it agrees. Okay, so I'm assembling this here. I've got one top bar kind of put in position. I got to straighten it out, but I've used these pieces of plywood to make sure this is all rigid and straight. And after that, then I'm going to center this post. My measurements were a little off, but I'm going to center that top beam, and then I'll be able to get the markings for this one based on the dimensions here. So anyhow, this is coming along nicely. I think my next step is to put a 93-inch piece between the 2x4s here and screw it in from the sides if I can find long enough screws. That would definitely straighten things up for sure. So at this point I've got the frame mostly built. Got a ratchet strap pulling the top layer in. I've got marks on it, and once I've got it centered, I'll screw the top board in place. I've got that strap holding an 8-foot piece just to make sure the whole frame is square, pulling it in at the top there with the tension on the strap. So anyhow, I think this will be pretty accurate when I'm done. So what I'm doing right now is working on this MDF spoil board. I had to go on the back of it and route out about 1/8 of an inch. And that actually was because this was supposed to be 5/8, but all I could find anywhere was 3/4. So anyway, got that done. Now I'm countersinking these screws pretty deep that are holding the side rails on, because the bit in the spoil board when I'm cutting might pass through, and I don't want to hit the screws with the bit. So anyhow, I'm going to get the other side at this point. Alright, so that's where I'm pausing for the evening. I've got it inside the garage. I'm going to chop the uprights off a bit. They're a little too tall for the beams in the garage here. No reason to keep them so long. So anyway, I need to get some 2x4x8s. I checked the level, or not the level, I guess the smoothness of the surface, and there's a little bit of a bow in the middle. So I'm going to use 2x4s behind it with screws to kind of straighten the whole thing out. I may also use a piece of angle iron up here behind that top rail. But everything's centered nicely. Looks to be quite square. So I think we're doing well. So continuing with the setup of the MakerMade frame, the spoil board was a little bit bowed. So I actually added this 2x4, a middle one, and then one at the bottom down here to straighten out the spoil board. I countersunk a bunch of screws to kind of suck everything into those 2x4s. Now I'd say it's flat within 1/16 of an inch, so that's going to have to be good enough. This is not exactly the most precise CNC setup, but the tolerances should work for the kind of work I'm expecting to do on it. Got a decision to make. It's like another $60 I have to pay to get the chains that extend all the way out here, the 15-foot chains, instead of the, well, I guess the ones that are 14 would kind of go in right here. But the extra length helps at the bottom of the sheet, apparently, with the angle, so that the sled gets controlled better. My plan is actually to build an adjustable skirt around this 4x8 sheet. I've got to think about how I'm going to do it, but I believe what I'm going to do is have thumb screw or knobs with screws that I can turn to kind of have the board go in and out depending on the thickness of material that's resting on this. So that's the plan, to set up some kind of screwed bracket with tapped elbows to kind of pull that board in and out. And I'll probably have some kind of markings to show a gauge on each corner, you know, as far as the actual dimension. And I'll use my micrometer calipers to to measure that, and then I'll be able to put a tick mark, you know, for the material thickness on each of the corners. That's my plan anyway, to make a spoil board that's gonna, or I'm sorry, a skirt for the spoil board that's actually gonna be able to be set for the size sheet I'm working with. So I figured out my plan for the skirt. I'm gonna have L brackets that come out this way, and they're going to hold right on this end here and down there, and on the other side in the same positions. They're going to hold 3/4 board, at a 90-degree angle, and then I'm going to have threaded inserts and clamping knobs on each of the 4 corners. Might be up here actually, depending on the bracket width, but I'll have the clamping knobs in such a way that I can slide with like I said, markings for the depth. I'll have different stock sizes marked on each of the 4 corners so that I can pull it out and then clamp it down on that mark, and then that's going to have this skirt be at the right thickness out for the material. So anyway, that's my plan for a adjustment of my MakerMade frame here. Alright, so I've got the chains attached and the spring, and they run down to the sled unit. I don't have a router in it yet. And then back here I've run the wires. I need to create a little bit of a boom or something to manage those wires a little bit better. And then I'll probably just have the dust collection, shop vac just sitting out here loose with as small of a hose as I can. Smaller shop vac hose adapted to my bigger shop vac. And then I'll just make sure it has enough slack to move around with it. But anyhow, so it's basically set up. I got the wires all connected to the Duo unit, Arduino Duo in the case. Got the power cord, USB cable going over. I'm going to use this back here as my workspace. Once I clear all the junk off of it, that'll be where I control the unit with computer programs. I'll just walk behind. And then, in essence, I'm ready to turn this thing on and calibrate it and see what it does. I still do need to build my skirt, but I can calibrate before I do that. So anyhow, we'll see how this thing works here shortly. Also, I don't know if I mentioned that I created a bit of a plywood rack back here. There's a little bit of a stop with that piece of wood that rises up, so I can keep my materials back here. I think I'm going to put a cross brace in the middle with a 2x4 I have on the other side of the room. So we'll see about that. But anyway, I think this is definitely a lot of work, kind of a pain in the butt to set up. I really struggled with the tiny fasteners on that sled, and then building the frame has been a bit of a process, but hopefully it'll cut nicely. We'll find out soon. Alright, so I've actually just put a skirt around the spoil board all the way around. And what I did is I cut a notch in the 2x4 down here so that the weight of the cutting piece will be supported. And this spoil board's going to bounce out. You can see it comes out. And I'm going to have it on adjustable elbows with lockdown knobs going into threaded inserts into the 2x4. So I'll be able to knob it, and then I'll have an indicator based on the depth of the workpiece. So I'll have 4 of those knobs, and then they'll rest on the spoil board. And I'll have an indicator, like I said, that gives me the workpiece size. So 3 millimeters, 4 millimeters, etc. I'll have one at the top of the bracket that'll show standard, and then millimeters at the bottom is what I'm thinking for common sizes. So anyway, that should make the spoil board very effective and adjustable. Should also help hold the plywood work in place in the frame nicely, because the spoil board's the skirt is pretty tight against the edge of the spoil board. So another little point of order: using MDF. This is the first time I ever bought a sheet of MDF for anything. I did not realize initially that it was 49 by 97 for whatever reason. So it caused me a little bit of work earlier in the process, redoing the edges where I had to carve some of the backside of the edge out with the router, because I was supposed to have 5/8 thickness, and this is actually 3/4. I don't know where you find 5/8 around, at least not around here. So Anyway, got the sled hung up there. The next step here will be to calibrate the sled, and I have the hardware to do the skirt adjusting coming from Amazon. Probably tomorrow it should be here, or I guess by the weekend. So anyway, making good progress on this. I'll get the computer hooked up and see where we're at with the thing working. Alright, so at this point I've got this table on locking casters that I picked up from Harbor Freight. The next step here is going to be to put the elbow or the angle brackets on this skirt, and I'm going to start by screwing blocks of wood in here to make these flush. And then I've got some cheap rulers that I got at Harbor Freight. I'm going to drill some holes in them and cut them in half, and they're going to be guides for a mark that's going to be etched on the elbow bracket, so that as these move in and out, it'll indicate the depth of the material. So that's my plan anyway. So I'm going to get at it. Alright, so I've got the scrap wood in the corners to hold everything flush. Now what I'm going to do is put the metal L brackets on. They're slotted brackets. And I'll put some inserts into the 2x4s. Those will have M4 metric threads. And what I'm going to do with that is use some locking knobs that should be here tomorrow, actually. For right now, I've got some temporary M4 bolts I'm going to use, and some washers. But the idea is that those locking knobs will hold the skirt in the right depth, and I'll have some rulers that I'm cutting in half, cheap rulers that will give me a reference point on each of the four. There's going to be one at the top, one at the bottom, on each side to adjust the material thickness that I'm working on. So that's the plan. Alright, so these are the slotted elbow brackets I'm using, and I've got the 4mm inserts, the first two of them, in place. I just kind of etched with the pen along the slot. So what I'm going to do is I'll put this in place, and then what I'm going to also do is put some inserts at each end of this on the spoil board, or on the skirt for the spoil board itself, so that I can lock it in place with some fasteners. Alright, so here's the one bracket in place. I'm going to wait on the locking nut tomorrow for this center. I'll be able to do material that's up to whatever this dimension is, at least an inch, with accuracy on the skirt. So, and again, I'm going to cut some rulers and put some scales in, I believe, probably this way. I got to figure out if I want to do that in millimeters or inches. I'm thinking millimeters is what I want to do. I'm going to have to start working in metric with this hobby. It's more accurate. So anyway, that's kind of what it's going to be. The locking knobs are the plastic ones. It's going to be 4mm, and I think a 5-star plastic. They'll be here tomorrow, like I said. So anyway, that's what they'll look like, each of the 4 brackets. Okay, and here it is with the rule in place. I've got a little indicator with some duct tape. It's Gorilla Tape to give me the measurement in millimeters as far as how far out the board is going. I think what I'll always do is try to be 1 millimeter thinner on the sideboard than the work. That way I'm not bumping it with the sled and stopping the cut. So maybe 1.5 millimeters. Anyhow, the missing piece will be here tomorrow. This may have to go over the rule a little bit. But anyhow, that's what they're each going to look like. I'm going to have to go get some more hardware. These I was going to use for something else, but I decided to use them here, and I only have 2 of them. So anyway, Tractor Supply tomorrow. Okay, so the knobs came in today. These are what all 4 corners are set up like, with the cut tape measures. These were $2 tape measures from Harbor Freight, metal with cork backing. So anyway, just drilled some holes in. I've made little markings to help guide the adjustment. There's an inch scale coming from 3N, and then I'll probably use a metric more often, but I have inches on each one as well. So anyway, these will stay where they're at, just snugged in place to hold it to the skirt. And then these knobs get an adjustment, loosening and tightening to push the skirt in and out. I've still got the blocking screwed in place, so I'll have to take that off before I can test the adjustments. And right here I've adjusted every corner for 1/4 inch, and that's kind of how the skirt will function. It looks like in the middle it's pretty much flush. This is a long length without any reinforcement in the back, so I think I'm going to need to screw a little 2x2 length into the back to stiffen these longer panels up. Doesn't seem to be an issue on these shorter panels, but shorter lengths, but or the bottom one, it's actually fairly rigid as well. But I still will probably screw a yeah, actually this one wiggles a little too much, so we'll have to stiffen this one up too. So the top and bottom longer lengths I'm going to put some wood in behind. But I'm pretty pleased with how this is functioning. It should work. Okay, so I decided that I was actually going to order the 15-foot chains instead of these 11-foot ones. Go ahead and push the motors out, so I'll be changing that once the chains arrive. But what I'm going to do right now is actually build on the side a monitor swivel and a keyboard stand that'll go out of the way on a pivot or a hinge, so that I can kind of program from a workbench that I have here. Actually, you can see it behind the welding machine there in my messy garage. I've got that bench right there I'm going to use. So, or stool. It's not a bench, it's a stool. So anyway, that's what I'm doing right now, is setting up the workspace with the computer tray and a monitor. Alright, so I've put a couple of heavy-duty hinges on the side. I've got this piece of wood that'll swing. I'm going to put the this 24-inch diagonal monitor. I'm going to mount it on an arm so it'll swivel out so I can see it while it's cutting. There's going to be a little standing height worktop for the laptop right in here. So that's the plan. That's what I'm working at here. I'll probably trim this piece back with the handsaw so it's not in the way of the monitor. Alright, so I've got my workstation set up on a swivel. I've got the bigger monitor set up so that it can swing around at an angle over here by the board where I can kind of view it while it's cutting. So this will work as a standing height for my height. I'm pretty short. Or I'll use that stool, the Craftsman stool that I have over here, to sit down and work. It just dawned on me I actually didn't leave room for a mouse. I'll have to slide this over to the side a little bit when I'm using the mouse over here. Or maybe I'll build an extension for a mouse. So, anyway, yeah, that would be pretty easy to do. I can build a board that slides out for the mouse. So, anyhow, this actually is the first thing I've designed. It's just a simple sawhorse design. I figure I'll break in my cutting attempts before I use expensive wood on some MDF, or I'm sorry, some OSB actually. I'm just going to cut one sawhorse and see how I cut. But first I've got to calibrate this. That's why I had to get it all set up. So now I'm just waiting on my 15-foot chains at this point. And I got to clean this atrociously messy garage. Alright, so I actually had some nicer wood laying around, a little bit nicer scrap wood. So I screwed it to the other table. It's good and thick, and I've got room over here for a mouse pad, which I originally forgot. And I'll probably put a little drink holder in here too. Maybe. So, anyhow, I've got the swivel workstation. Got my Craftsman work stool, so that'll be nice. Nice workspace to get designs done and tweak things on the fly as I see issues with prototypes. So, anyhow, that's it. That's about all I can do for the evening till I get the 15-foot chains in. So my 15-foot chains came in from MakerMade. I'm going to go ahead and get them set up and then get the calibration done. So I've got to detach everything from the sled, and I need to move these motors over to the mark that I made when I was on the fence about whether I was getting the bigger chains or not. So anyway, I'm going to get that done, and then I can calibrate. And once it's calibrated, I can start cutting projects for the bus. And I'm also going to start making kit kayaks and starting a business based on that. That's my intention, doing some prototyping. So anyhow, I am going to get started with this moving of the chains, or swapping of the chains. So I've got the stepper motors moved out, got the chains restrung. At this point, I'm ready to try to fire up the Makerverse software and calibrate this. I'm going to watch the videos from Casey Connolly, 2 Tankards, on YouTube for the calibration series. I'm going to watch those again. I've actually already watched them a couple times, but there's a lot of details, so I want to make sure I do this right. So with the XL format, moving the motors to the end of the beam here, I actually had to move the Duo unit to the middle of the top bar, at least on this rolling setup. So anyway, I've got a multiple outlet extension cord kind of set up here for the monitor, the computer, and the actual MakerMade power for the DC power supply. So anyway, at this point, I'm ready to fire up and see if I can calibrate it. Alright, so I've got some clamps here. I'm measuring the distance from the center of the axis of the stepper motor to the top of the work surface. Happens to be 660 millimeters. All of my sheets are going to rest at the bottom there on that ledge. So I used a sheet of 4-foot material, and I kind of clamped this long level in place. So that I'm at the top of the work surface, or the workspace, and then I made sure this was at a right angle. So looking at it, I'm going to call that 660 millimeters right there from the center of the axis. Okay, so I've got the thing calibrated to within 1 millimeter. I told it to find the center of the board. That's a pretty good center of the board. I'm not mad at that. So it does this side to within 0 to 0.5 millimeter accuracy in 2 dimensions on both corners. It finds the center. Over here it's a little hard to measure, but I think I might be about 1.5 millimeters off in the X direction. Could just be that I made a slight difference in dimension when I was fixing this MDF board to be an actual 4x8. I also am going to do a precision calibration once I can fire this up. It's actually like 4 in the morning right now, so I'm not going to run the router, but I will start cutting projects, and I'll start with a precision calibration. I don't know if it's going to buy me much, but I think I've got it set. It took me about 4 hours this evening of being very diligent and careful. That high-pitched whine is just the stepper motors being connected to the controller. It just makes that high-frequency whine. It's a normal feature, unfortunately. Although next to the running router, it's probably not a big deal. It is kind of annoying when you're not cutting anything, though, when you're just working with the machine for adjustments and whatnot. So, so far my impressions of this is it's worth the money, worth the price, but it is a lot of finagling. I'm probably about 1/3 the cost of what I'd have in the next CNC router up. I've got somewhere around $1,500, $1,600 into this project at this point, maybe slightly more with all the wood. I did have to buy the longer chains. They were another $60 roughly, because I wanted better accuracy on a large sheet. And so far it is proving that way. We'll see how it performs when the router's actually running. But so far so good. It's just been really kind of complicated. If I can give MakerMade some feedback, it is to, first of all, not make people buy a longer chain. That was kind of cheesy. That's my biggest complaint, other than the complexity so far. The other thing is the size of the fasteners. These fasteners on this unit are just so small, the ones that you have to actually fasten, you know, like these little screws and things. Took quite a while to put the sled together. I had a tolerance issue with this bracket up against these aluminum rails. It was really difficult to get those in. And then building the frame, you've got to have some know-how to do that properly and be really careful with your dimensions. And then this calibration process has been honestly way complicated, although thank you to Casey Connolly from Two Tankards. If you're going to buy this, go to his YouTube channel and do the all 8 calibration steps, being very careful to follow the directions to a T, which I did. I watched the videos 4 or 5 times, and then I watched them as I was going through this on my monitor over here. I have a YouTube, link to his videos, and I was going through step by step as I did the calibration, and it looks like I've been successful. So anyway, more to come on this after I've made some cuts. I'll give you my final impression of this MakerMade M2. For a novice, I've never done CNC routing before. Although I do have some knowledge from engineering school and production processes and so on. So, I have some understanding of how this stuff works, but this is my first time using it for my projects. So, anyhow, more to come here. The first attempt at cutting. Looks like it's working, we'll see. It seems to be working, although it's taking a pretty big depth of pass. It doesn't match what I put in the easel, so I'm not sure. I'm going to make a sign for my local beer distributor where I get my garage beer as my first little project. I figured it was pretty easy to do with this scrap of pine plywood from remodeling. But it does seem to be taking off too big of a bite at once. It's struggling just a little bit with the cut. I hope I don't break the bit. Looks like it's doing it. Hopefully the slight setting that I have off here for the depth, hopefully that doesn't cause damage to the bit by the time it's done. But so far it's working pretty well. Alright, so the first little project here was a fail. About halfway through here, the bit finally broke off because the settings weren't quite right in the program. It was trying to do a full pass at more than its bit width, and it finally gave up the ghost. I'm not sure what I did wrong. Probably there's settings in the Makerverse I need to learn about, but it initially started out okay. The letter I used in easel, I should have paid more attention to its cutting, but this is all just a learning process for me. I'm going to modify this file a little bit to make the letters wider so that the 1/8 inch bit will actually cut them. And then I need to figure out why it's trying to take off a huge pass all at once. And I think this is too deep anyway. I'm probably going to reduce that depth to a much shorter, much smaller distance. Doesn't need to be that deep to see the letters and the image, so I'll probably change that. And then the letters down here, I already knew they weren't going to work at all, but I'm just trying to experiment here on some scrap wood to see what this M2 does, how it works, you know, after calibration. I think it's going to work out. You know, these letters are pretty crisp. You know, for an upcut bit with, you know, rough edges, not bad. I think this will work really well for the projects I have in mind for the bus and for my kit kayaks that I'm going to build. You know, where it's actually going to be a clear cut, except for the tabs, through the wood. Much simpler designs. So anyway, this was a bit aggressive for a first project, and you know, I'm learning here. So anyhow, it's very late at night. I'm going to shut this thing down and head to bed. Alright, so this is take 2 on this first project of a sign for my local beer store, just to be nice and make them a sign. I thought it'd be amusing. Beats the sawhorses I had intended as the first cut. Allows me to use thinner wood to get started, so it'll be quicker. But anyway, what I'm going to do is get this going. I had to recalibrate it because I made a stupid mistake and hit reset chains when they were the wrong position. So that was on me. Just had to reset the chain calibration. But anyway, if things go well, the cut will start down here. And I've got the depth set correctly. It was a glitch in my coating and easel. It somehow changed it to the wrong depth. Anyway, we're going to get this thing going and see how it goes. I increased the speed after learning about chip load on the bits. And I turned down the RPMs to the lowest setting. So hopefully this is a better cut. It's going to also hopefully only shave 0.1 inch at a time. So we'll see if I don't break the bit or not. I think it should be better. The heat should be better on the bit with the lower RPMs. Alright, so it's cutting the sign out here. I like the noises it's making better than the prior attempt. I think these cut settings are more favorable. Hopefully the bit holds out nicely. Seems to be cutting pretty well. I don't hear nearly as many angry noises from the router. So I'm hopeful that the bit will not get broken in this process. It's working pretty well. It's coming along very well. I think it'll finish properly and not break the bit, so I'm happy. And here's the first project finished on the second attempt. I did learn some lessons. One is, you'll see that I added some skirting sort of on the outside as I was finishing it. You always need to skirt it, otherwise things wander like this. This T I had to recut. I actually had to cut. I deleted everything but these letters in the perimeter and did a second pass to clean up the T that had chunks in it. And that worked nicely for the letters, so I'm very happy with the accuracy. And it'll do the same passes without wandering. The tolerance is pretty good. But I did learn a few lessons. This will get painted, actually. I'm going to fill with black paint. And then I'll sand and stain it. I'm going to clean the edges up with a belt sander. Take some of maybe even a quick pass with a saw, just to clean the edge up a bit. And then it'll get, like I said, black paint and stained. And I think it'll look really nice. So there's the quote. And this is some clip art for Ben Franklin's head. And the business name. This is a beer store that I go to, and I'm just going to surprise them with the sign because it's not really high enough quality to sell it at this point, but they'll still probably like it. So anyway, that was my first project with the M2, just to learn. So I think it went pretty well.